Hi, welcome back to the workshop for the 53rd and final episode of the ES335 build. And this time we're going to get it all put together and give you a little sound demonstration. Okay, so I've done a few little bits off camera while we've been away. I've taken the plugs out of the tailpiece holes and I've removed the foam from inside the body. Don't need that anymore, but apart from that we're pretty much as we left off last time. So it's time to get this thing put together, and I can't tell you how excited I am about this. It's been such a long build. So before I put any bits on it, first thing I'm going to do, and I've been dying to do this for ages, is just get some oil onto this fretboard. And this is probably going to take quite a few applications to get it how we want it. But we can start to get some of that in there. I think that already looks a lot better. Okay, so with that soaking in, I'm going to start off by putting the strap buttons on. And I always do this first, mainly because it will just give me something to rest the end of the guitar on when I'm assembling, and that will stop any wear on the lacquer. This one. There's the other. Next up, we're going to install the studs for the bridge to go on. And what I've done here is I've got two of the adjusting nuts kind of cinched against each other onto the shaft. And I've actually got a couple of old ones that I use for this purpose, so I don't mar the actual ones I'm going to use up with the pliers when I'm putting them on. And it's just a case of screwing those in. And then you can just kind of loosen them off against each other. And then we can put the actual adjuster on. And that's about spot on. Okay, so that's the bridge fitted. Next up are the studs for the tailpiece. So I'm just going to put a couple of bench cookies under the guitar where I'm going to be knocking this in, and give it a few taps. Now before I put this one in, I just need to add a piece of wire through the hole that I drilled in there into the cavity, so we can connect that to ground once we do the wiring. And I'll just do a quick continuity test on that before we move on. Yeah, that's fine. And just check that the tailpiece fits as well, and that's all fine. So those two can come off for the time being, and we'll put those back away safely. So next I'm going to move to the other end and going to start fitting the tuners. Okay, so I've got as much stuff on as I can, and I've put it off as long as humanly possible, but it's now time to get the electrics fitted into this. I've done a little bit of experimenting, and I found out that the leads from both pickups easily reach where I need them to out of this F-hole, and I also know that all my components will easily go through this F-hole into the body cavity. So I'm not going to bother feeding stuff in through the cavity in the pickup route, just simply don't need to do it, but it was always worthwhile having it just in case. So to get started, I'm simply just going to get the pickups fitted. And I'm just going to pull the wires out with the aid of this pair of forceps. And then I'm just going to screw these in as normal. Okay, so pickups are in. I'm just going to place this bit of leather and cover as much of that up as I can. Now there's not actually that much to solder on in this setup. All I need to do is add the wires from the bridge pickup to the bridge volume pot, the wires from the neck pickup to the neck volume pot, and then connect this earth wire, and then it's just a matter of pulling all the controls into place. But of course I'm saying that like it's a 2-minute job. It probably won't be. So I've got the handy wiring octopus because I'm probably going to need that, and we'll start getting some of this set up. So that's the pickups wired in, and I've got the switch in the middle position, so in theory both of these pickups should be on, and they are. That's the bridge, and that's the neck. So everything seems to be working absolutely fine, so can't put it off any longer. Time to get the dental floss out. Now I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I actually think this isn't going to be quite as bad as you might think to fish these in. The switch and these 3 pots I can kind of fiddle into place with my fingers, maybe with the help of some long forceps. It's only really the output jack and this tone pot that I think I'm going to have to fish in. If I have to do the rest, it's not a massive issue, but I don't think I'm going to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start first off with the furthest one away, which is the output jack. I'm going to get that in place, and then I'll start working my way through the rest of them and see how we do. I'm going to pull them in with a bit of dental floss. I've used this technique before and it does work quite well. But I'm going to get the dental floss to where I need it in the first place by taping it to this piece of quite stout wire, and hopefully that will get it through to where I need it. Well, I'm not going to lie to you, but this has been a real mission. It's not so much pulling the controls through, that's been fairly straightforward, but I'm having real issues with the wires snapping, so I've had to take it all out again, kind of rewire some of it, put some slightly longer wires in to give me a bit of free play, and it seems to be going in okay. So I'm at the stage now where I've got one volume, one tone control to get in, then hopefully we'll be able to hook it all up and touch wood, it'll work. And you might see I've actually amended the wiring harness a little bit. I've got a long lead coming off the volume controls for the bridge and the neck, and I've also got an additional ground lead there, and I'm going to wire the pickups into these instead of trying to wire them directly to the pots, because that was one of the things that was causing me so much trouble. All the pickup wiring is out of the way here, ready to be soldered in place. I'm hoping these last two pots will be quite straightforward to get in, because I've got quite good access through the F-hole. So let's go. Okay, so that's everything in and fastened down. Now it's just a case of connecting the rest of these wires up, getting them all trimmed down nicely so we can hide them out of the way, and we should be good to go. Okay, so we've still got a little bit of wiring to kind of tuck up out of the way, but before I do that I'm just going to make sure that it's working. So plug it in, switch it on. Okay, bridge, neck, excellent, middle position. I do believe we have liftoff. Whew. Excellent. So now what I need to do is get this unplugged, get all these wires tucked out of the way and tidied up, and hopefully we won't disturb any joints while we're doing that, and then we can clear all this masking tape off and have a look at it with the stuff installed. Okay, and one last little finishing touch for this bit. Put some knobs on it. I'm not totally convinced about the black knobs. But it wouldn't take very much work at all to swap them out for something else, perhaps some gold ones, I don't know. I'll have to try and live with it for a few weeks and see how I feel about that. But that is the bulk of the hardware in. I still need to tidy the wiring up a little bit. There's one or two wires that are just visible through the F-hole. But bear in mind this will be having a pickguard on, regardless of what some people have been saying about not putting one on. I prefer to have a pickguard. I don't always play with the pick, sometimes play with my fingers, and I just find it really handy to have somewhere to chuck the pick when I'm not using it. Okay, so with that done, nothing else for it but to get some strings chucked onto this thing and start cutting the nut. Okay, to start this I'm just going to chuck the 2 E strings on so I can kind of get the location on the nut that I need for my string spacing. We can get that cut and get this thing strung up properly. Okay, so next I'm going to just position the string on the nut where I'd like it to sit. And just make some pencil marks on there. Then I'm going to take the nut out and use my nut spacing rule to divide this up exactly how it needs to be. Okay, and to cut these nut slots to an accurate depth, I'm going to use the feeler gauge method. I'm not going to go into this method too much. I've covered it in other videos before, so I'll leave a link in the description to one of those videos. But it's basically you set a stack of feeler gauges up to the correct height, and then you place them next to the nut and carve your nut slot with the appropriate file. Until you just start to catch the feeler gauges, and in theory that nut slot should be spot on. Okay, so those nut slots are nicely cut now, all working fine. So I just need to get the strings slackened right off, take the nut out, just give it a quick clean up, make sure there's no sharp edges around those slots we've just put in, and then we can get it glued. Okay, so that's the nutting. Worked out beautifully, everything's working absolutely fine now. So the only job left is to install this pickguard. Now you might also remember that I said I wasn't particularly happy with the black knobs and I was going to have to live with them for a couple of weeks. Well, as it turns out, I couldn't even live with them for a couple of days. So they've now been replaced with these nice gold knobs. But again, I'm not entirely convinced about using speed knobs on this build. I think the ideal solution is the bell shape that the black knobs were, but in this colour. So I'll get another set on order, but I think for the time being these look a lot better than the black ones. In terms of the pickguard, I did say I was going to reprofile the first one I made. In the end I decided that it was just as much work than it would be to make a new one, so I've made a new one with a much nicer profile, I feel. So that just needs to be put into position. Now to do this I'm going to use some 2-part epoxy, but what I've done is I've put a piece of double-sided tape on with a hole punched through it. I'm going to put the bracket in place, fix the pickguard at this end, and then peel off the double-sided tape backing, put a tiny drop of epoxy where I've cut the hole out, and put the pickguard in position then. And the idea is that the double-sided tape will hold it in position while the epoxy dries. It's only 5-minute epoxy, but it is quite cold today, so it'll probably take a little bit longer. Okay, let's get going on that. Okay, so with that in place now, all I need to do is just go through the kind of basic setup steps of neck relief, string action and intonation. Listening to it, It's not a million miles out. The action is quite nice, kind of out of the box, but it does need a little bit of tweaking. So I'm probably just going to fast forward through most of this bit. You've seen me do this before. If you haven't seen me do it, I'm sure you've seen Dave do it 1,000 times. So I'll be back in a couple of minutes and we can see what this thing sounds like. Okay, and there it is, all done. Which only leaves one last thing to do, and that's to get a decent amp out here and give it a try. Okay, time for a quick demo, and I'll be using the Marshall Origin 20 for this one. Okay, time to give it a quick demo. Please forgive the quality of the audio of my voice. I've got my sound recorder set up onto the amp because I think this is the most important part of this little bit. I'll just start with some kind of clean tones, and then we'll give it a little bit of crunch later on. So first off, bridge pickup, clean. Middle position. The neck. And then I've just kicked on a little bit of boost just to give it a bit of a crunch tone. Middle position. Okay, and there it is, another build done, and what an epic it's been. I've learned so much from this build, and I really hope that you've been able to take a lot away from it as well. However, this isn't the end of the story. I'm actually going to go away and sift through the hundreds of hours of footage that have gone into making the 53 episodes of this series, pick out the best bits and edit all of that together to make one final full build video. So keep a lookout for that in the next couple of weeks. I'll be back very soon with the next build series, so look forward to seeing you on that one. So as always, like if you've liked, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.